Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's program, What AI Hallucinations Can Teach Lawyers About Judgment, Verification, and Professional Responsibility. I'm Ala Policastro, Director of Education and Professional Development at Beverly Hills Bar Association. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Professor John Lande. Professor Lande is the Isidore Loeb Professor Emeritus at the University of Missouri School of Law, where he directed the LLM program in dispute resolution. He holds a JD from Hastings College of Law and a PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he has practiced law and mediation since 1980. A prolific scholar and author, Professor Lande has been recognized by the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution with the Award for Outstanding Scholarly Work. He has authored multiple ABA published books and has developed the Real Practice Systems Negotiation and Mediation Coach AI tool to promote good decision making by parties, lawyers, and mediators. And this is a public service tool available for free, by the way. He writes the Theory Meets Practice column for Alternatives to the High Cost of Litigation and contributes regularly to the indisputably.org blog. Professor Lande looks forward to answering all your questions today, so please submit them to the Q&A box on your screens. And now I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you very much, Ala, and thank you for inviting me to give this presentation, and thank you all for taking the time to come and spend some time on this. So I am going to share my screen now, and hopefully it's going to work right. Okay, can you all see this?
Yes,
It looks good? Okay. So you will be getting a copy of this PowerPoint, which includes links to some resources at the end. And as Ala said, feel free to use the chat with questions and comments. And I can stick around at the end. We may have enough time during this program to answer any questions you have, but if we get to the end of the half hour and you want to stick around and ask more questions, I'm happy to answer them. So there we go. So who do you trust? Now, the question with hallucinations is, do you trust AI? And of course, the answer with hallucinations is no, you shouldn't. You need to verify. And that's actually not, I mean, it's different in some ways, but you need to verify things from humans. So for example, with your clients. Now, of course, presumably you would assume that your clients are being honest with you and telling the truth, but you may find that they don't tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth for a variety of reasons that don't necessarily indicate bad intent. And what about experts? Now, of course, you know, they have by definition expert knowledge. So presumably you would trust them theoretically, although a lot depends. Their answers may be related somehow to who has retained them. But judges, of course, you're going to trust judges. They're neutral, except lawyers don't always trust judges. And indeed, on average, you spend half of your time arguing that judges are wrong. And indeed, some of the time you actually believe that. And you need to identify reasons why they're wrong and argue why your view is correct. I didn't put it on the slide here, but your spouse or your partner. I mean, for sure, your spouse or partner is always, no, they're probably, you wouldn't tell them that they're not always accurate, but they may not always be. And what about yourself? Well, you can always, no, you can't always trust yourself either because you don't know everything and sometimes you make mistakes. So the point, obviously, of this slide is that every human and also AI makes mistakes and you need to verify them. And indeed, what lawyers are is we are professional skeptics. We are looking at information given to us by a wide range of humans, and we don't necessarily agree with them all. And so there are things that lawyers do routinely. This is part of our job. You ask people questions, you will look at information, you'll do some research so that you can have more confidence in the information that you receive and that the information you put out in oral statements and in writing, particularly in materials that you submit to the court. So, what about hallucinations? Now, again, you wouldn't be here if you hadn't heard of hallucinations and you didn't think that they were significant in some way. And you probably know that, of course, hallucinations are inaccurate outputs that may sound plausible. And indeed, it can be very tricky because they do sound so plausible. And so if you use AI and you find a site that just sounds too good to be true, or that sounds like it really nails the point that you want to make, it would be tempting to just believe it and cite it. But you know that hallucinations are things that AI tools produce that certainly we hear about fabricated sites of cases, but also they make up quotations, rules, facts, and summaries. So there's a lot of stuff that's inaccurate, and they're extremely visible. A lot of the mistakes that humans make are not so visible. They're in some ways kind of funny, but actually they're embarrassing and problematic. They're funny if you're not the one who submitted some materials with hallucinated citations, but they're embarrassing and problematic. So if you do, one, you are subject to sanctions by the court. It doesn't instill confidence by your client if you have submitted a paper with hallucinated authorities. Your colleagues in your firm probably don't think well of you, and it's not good for your reputation as the person who submitted papers with hallucinated citations. And it's also not good for the legal system to have all these news stories popping up about lawyers who are sanctioned and sheepishly have to acknowledge that they have submitted AI output without having carefully checked it. There's a database that keeps track of reported cases where lawyers have been sanctioned, and it's this running total. The last time I checked, there were more than 1,250 reported cases in the United States. There are cases all over the world, and courts have imposed sanctions. So it's important, obviously, that you read material carefully. And it's important not only to read, obviously, your own material, but also others. Even if you do not, even if you do not use AI yourself, um, you may find that your opposing counsel has submitted material that has hallucinations in it. So you need to check carefully. Now, theoretically, if you get material from your counterpart lawyer, your opposing counsel, you should be reading it carefully with an eye towards picking out what you see as errors in their argument, and you should be reading their sources to make sure that they're valid. So it's really important that you obviously check for hallucinations. And indeed, there are rules about this, and the rules require you to do what you should be doing anyway. So the basic one is that you're responsible for the accuracy of your work, and you can be sanctioned if you provide false information to the courts. And there are a whole range of duties under the rules of professional conduct relating to competence, diligence, candor, reasonable inquiry, and others that apply to the use of AI. And you should be familiar with them. And again, certainly if you use AI in your work, but even if you don't, it's important to be aware of them. The American Bar Association issued this formal opinion 512 in 2024 that was specifically about AI. And as you may know, there are some proposals for revisions of the California rules, or actually comments to the rules, that would make it much more specific about requiring verification and taking care to use AI output carefully. So there are some surprising values of hallucinations, and they asked me to do this presentation because I wrote an article with that title, and um, and you might wonder, well, what the heck good is an hallucination if it is false? And the answer is that it can make you think, it can give you ideas, and it can require your judgment, which is really the key thing that lawyers have, is your judgment in lots of contexts, not just with AI. So I think about when I was practicing law a long time ago. I don't practice now. Uh, I've been a law professor, and now I'm a retired law professor. But I remember when I was practicing, I had an experience that I suspect that probably everybody on this call has had, where I got a citation to something that looked like a promising case or authority, and I'd look at it, and it didn't really help the argument that I wanted to make. But in the course of finding this case that wasn't so helpful, I found other things that actually were helpful. And that's a surprising value of hallucinations. It can lead you to find things that you might not otherwise have found that are really helpful, and it can prompt you to think and give you ideas. So it can stimulate your thinking. And you can think about it this way, and the fact that AI routinely now does produce hallucinations forces you to think carefully. Consider a counterfactual. Suppose that AI produced responses that were 100% accurate. You could take it to the bank, it gave you a citation, you knew that the case existed, that the point that it was making was on point. Well, what would happen? You would lose an incentive to really use your judgment. You would just become complacent. And part of what having the value of hallucinations is it forces you to actually think, to look, and to consider what makes sense or not. And consider the opposite. I talked with a lawyer who told me that she used AI and it made a mistake, and so she doesn't use it anymore. And well, that isn't that. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. You think of your clients, your experts, judges, yourself, even your spouses and partners. Are you going to get rid of them because they make mistakes? No, you use your judgment, and you think about how you would assess various statements and try and figure out what makes sense or not. So here's an example. So consider if you asked AI to suggest sites for writing a brief, and it provides a bunch of really good sites, a questionable one, and a hallucination. Is that a good response? For the lawyer I was talking about who said, well, there's a hallucination, I'm not going to use AI, it's not a good response. But I would submit it is a good response, because you're getting a bunch of really helpful sites, and you should be checking to determine whether any of them are accurate and helpful for your purpose. So the fact that there are hallucinations in and of itself should not be a problem. It's really a question of whether the cost benefit makes sense. And you obviously have to think about when you're going to use it and how much you will find that it's helpful for doing this research. And of course, one of the things that's happening, we are at this very early stage relatively in the development of AI. And so you have these tools that are getting better and better. From my experience, it's going to be a long time before they can develop these tools that don't produce hallucinations, but I don't know. We're going to have to see. But at least in the immediate future, you have to assume that it will, and that your job is to use AI if you're going to use it as well as possible and figure out how to use it. So, what do if you do use AI? Well, you want to check if the source actually exists. One of the most embarrassing kinds of hallucinations is when lawyers file papers with uh, citing cases that just do not exist at all. So those should be relatively easy to identify, and then looking to see if the sources are current and authoritative, and whether they support the proposition asserted, and whether they omit important qualifications or ambiguities. These are the sorts of things that lawyers should be doing anyway. So if you get a paper from the other side, or you get, and in some ways you might think of an AI as a paper or sites that are as if you're getting them from the other side, that you really need to scrutinize carefully, as if you're reading a paper from the opposing party. So, given the fact that there are hallucinations, is it even worth it? I mean, verification takes time, but research and verification has always taken time. It's not as if it's an immediate process. Doing research and figuring out what authorities are relevant and helpful for your case is a time-consuming process. So whether the verification of AI responses takes more time, I'm not sure that it does, but you're going to need to do that in any case. And whatever additional time you spend to verify sources may be offset by the gains in efficiency, as well as generating brainstorming ideas, helping you draft, and finding sources that you might not find so easily. So using AI thoughtfully can improve both the efficiency and your judgment. And I don't practice law now. I use AI every day because I write a lot. And fortunately, I don't, well, sometimes I use it to find sources. A lot of the sources that I use are social science sources. And I find that sometimes it produces hallucinations. It cites to articles that just do not exist, or don't make the point that it's arguing or that it suggests. But a lot of times it produces good ones that are helpful, just like the hypo that I was talking about. And so for me, it's really worthwhile. It's very efficient, and it gives me ideas of things to look into and follow up, as I mentioned earlier. Now, one of the things is that, we've been talking so far about uses where there is a single right answer, So does this case exist or not? Does it stand for the proposition that the AI output provides or not? That there's a right answer to that, but there are a lot of uses of AI that involve judgment rather than getting a correct answer. I mean, AI is not necessarily a truth-telling machine. It's not like a machine at a carnival where you stick in a quarter and you're supposed to get the right answer. I mean, that's part of the way some tools work, but AI can involve things that stimulate your judgment or promote your judgment. So brainstorming ideas, helping in drafting and editing, again, that's what I do most of the time, and it is a fabulous resource that helps me really improve my thinking and writing and expressing ideas. One of the real values of AI is playing a devil's advocate. It can be a coach. And one of the things is that it can be kind of awkward and embarrassing to go to one of your colleagues in a firm and ask for advice about some things. And one of the virtues of using AI is you don't have what's called judgment anxiety, or you don't need to, and you can ask them anytime. You can ask them as much as you want. So getting this devil's advocate point of view and addressing the biases that we all have can be very helpful. It can explore alternatives and identify questions you hadn't considered. So here's some resources that you might want to consider. And again, you should be getting this, and these are links that you can click on. Here's the article that I wrote. Here's the ABA opinion that I referred to. Here's an article that summarizes the proposed rules in California that are going to require you to verify every AI output. This article discusses a range of risks of using AI and suggests ways to manage those risks. This is the database of the hallucination cases that I talked about. And then down below here we have this tool that Ala mentioned, this real practice system negotiation and mediation coach, which I will say immodestly is really good. And it's free. And then there's this annotated bibliography of things that I have written. And so with that, I'm going to leave you with this last slide. And if you want to download the Surprising Value of Hallucinations article, you can just use this QR code. And with that, I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions or comments. Susie, do we have anything?
Yes, so it looks like I have one here from Douglas. All right, have you ever heard of a law firm terminating an attorney for incorporating the wrong citations in a legal brief?
I have not. I can imagine that they might do so, and that would be understandable. I read one case where the judge, or it was an appellate, federal appellate case, and the court said, at this point, everybody, should know about hallucinations, and so you can't really say, "Oh, I've never heard of this before." So everybody should be on notice, and I think that that would be an understandable reaction by law firms to possibly terminate. And of course, part of what this also gets to is that law firms have an obligation to supervise their attorneys and to train them.
All right, looks like we have another question from Daniel. In your hypo, AI provides 4 excellent sites and 1 hallucination. Even though it provides some excellent sites, 1 hallucination can completely destroy the credibility. Does the cost-benefit analysis weigh against using AI?
Not in my view. I mean, not if you recognize that it's a hallucination. I mean, that's the whole point. You should be, if you do this research and you identify something as a hallucination, then your job is not to use it in filing papers in court or citing it or relying on it in conversations with clients. So in my mind, it doesn't destroy the credibility unless you use it without checking and determining whether it's false. I mean, in some ways, that's as if you were using a misleading citation without getting AI. I mean, that's a problem. So the short answer, Daniel, in my mind, is the cost benefit doesn't weigh against using AI unless you find that most of the responses you get are hallucinations. And if you're getting a lot of junk, then I would say, indeed, the cost benefit does weigh against using AI. Now, part of that has to do with learning how to, one, choose the right tools, and two, use the right, use prompts that elicit the information that you're looking for. Now, again, I don't do research on legal authorities very much. And I know that there are some tools that are specifically designed for that. And I'm guessing that there are a lot that are improving the quality of the responses, and so you're getting a smaller and smaller percentage of hallucinated answers. So a long answer to your question, the short answer, Daniel, is the cost benefit analysis doesn't weigh against using AI unless you have a very high proportion of responses that are hallucinations.
All right, looks like we have another one from Christine. Do you use double AI to check for mistakes? Have an AI scan your doc for things that sound or seem funky? Not your final doc, but the stuff you get from AI itself?
I think that's a great idea. Again, you have to be careful. So, your second AI may also create errors, but it also may pick up some. So, let's just say you feed in a document and it identifies some hallucinations, then and you're confident they're right, that those are hallucinations, you can cross those off the list. And then if there's some where they say, oh, they're not hallucinations, then you can check those manually. So I think that that's a useful thing. And I actually do, I primarily use ChatGPT because that's where my RPS coach is based, but I also have Claude account. And so sometimes I will ask Claude for, to check on things. So that's a terrific idea. I see that Winston, I'm not sure I'll pronounce your last name, has raised his hand. I don't know if you can speak in this webinar format, but anyway, Susie, back to you.
Alrighty, it looks like I do see a few comments, but they don't, let's see. They go ahead and check our, excuse me, sorry. All right. Have one here. When AI proposes an unfamiliar authority, what is your personal workflow for validating it before relying on it?
Well, again, my personal workflow is that I don't do legal research these days, but what I would do would be the same thing that I would do without AI. So if you're using Westlaw or Lexis or whatever other source you use where you can rely on the output, or there are other things so that you actually can find a copy of the valid source to be able to check. So that's what I would do. I mean, whatever you would do without AI, that's what I would do. If you get a site for a case, look up that site. I hope that makes sense.
All right, and it looks like we have
Oh, I
one
see
more question
Nicole.
here.
Yeah, and some comments. Here's related to just what was said. Nicole says, I've run into Lexis AI or Westlaw AI saying the case is not found and the case is real. Well, who can you believe? I mean, in some ways, this is the nature of the world we're living in these days, and I guess maybe you need to go to the court documents themselves to even double check. But that's interesting. Again, I've used Lexis and Westlaw myself. So Nicole says usually goes to the court records to find the cases. So, unfortunately, this is the world we're living in. And I see Susan says she uses StrongSuit, which is a closed system, also uses Claude and ChatGPT. Between the three of them, they check each other in citations and they frequently add different reasoning. Claude is the most superior in reasoning. StrongSuit is not well known and is a secret weapon. So, one of the things that Susan's comment reflects is that you will use your judgment over time and find some tools are better than others. Neil says he uses BlueJ for tax analysis and research. It provides citations and links to the source document. And actually, that's Neil's point is exactly right, which is that you should be asking your AI tool for links to the sources, and some of them will do it routinely, but if they don't, you should ask. And that's usually a good way of determining that there's a whether the source exists or not. Nicole includes a link to the research she uses. John says, my article is interesting and downloaded, but wanted to cite the article in a memorandum. Is it published anywhere that you can cite it? You bet. The citation is, it's in, well, one, you can cite it. It's published on SSRN, and there's a citation at the bottom there, but it's also published originally in a magazine, The Alternatives to the High Costs of Litigation, which is published by the CPR, Institute for Conflict Prevention and Resolution. So yes, you definitely can do it. It's a terrific source. I'm being facetious here, but I recommend my writing because I wrote it and I think it's good. Attorney I work for uses Lexis and I'm a 3L. She has me pull cases she can't find in Lexis, but Westlaw does not always find them unless I use traditional advanced search. Well, again, this just gets to the fact that you need to find out ways that you can really rely on the sources. And what this shows is, I mean, Lexis and Westlaw, I mean, now they have AI built into it, but before, they didn't have AI, and you should be able to rely on it, but you may not. And Christine says AI doesn't peg everything. Westlaw doesn't peg everything. So, I mean, again, what the whole point here is that you need to find sources that you can really rely on, which may mean going to the court records, as someone pointed out earlier. I think we may have responded to all the ones that are out there. I appreciate all the questions. Nicole has a new link to share with thecourtlistener.com.
All right, it looks like we are at 32 minutes. Professor Lande, do you have any other closing comments that you would like to make?
Only that I first want to thank you for inviting me. I hope you found that this has been helpful, and good luck. It's a brave new world out there with AI, and hopefully this has heightened your appreciation for the need to be careful, and also to appreciate the potential values. Again, we have been talking about looking at things where there is a clear right answer. I have found, I use it for writing, as I said, and as a writing and editing tool, as a copy editing tool, you cannot find a human who will do a better job of copy editing and proofreading than AI. So part of it is figuring out what tasks you're doing and which AI tools can help and what you can rely on and what you can't. So you may just want to think about that graphic that I had at the beginning of, the client and the expert and the judge and everyone, and you're going to use your judgment about what you can rely on and what not, and what sorts of clues suggest you really need to be more or less vigilant. So with that, I just wish you well. Again, I thank you for inviting me, and I hope you find this useful.
This concludes today's presentation. Thanks again to Professor John Lande for an excellent presentation today, and thank you so much to our audience for joining us. Have a great afternoon, everyone.